So you mentioned something in our pre-show notes, which is something worth mentioning, I believe. Terron Armstead, by the way, the offensive lineman for the Dolphins, went down with an injury scare yesterday, but apparently it's some good news. They feel like he's not going to miss any time.
They got good news. I don't know anyone getting injured is good news.
Well, he's going to be. They say he's going to be available for Week 1.
Right.
So there is some optimism there that they avoided something catastrophic, and he's not going to miss the entire season or several weeks or anything like that. But you kind of brought up something that I think puts Miami and the coaching staff and also Tua Tagovailoa in kind of a precarious spot here. You know, kind of what if he suffers and what if he gets dinged again? Mm-hmm. Another concussion. Well, then what?
Right.
I mean, we're a year removed. How long does the stigma of you can't play him or he can't play for a significant amount of time after another concussion, how long does there need to be a gap between concussions before all of a sudden it's okay for that to happen again?
I mean, look, I'm not going to have any sort of medical opinion on this.
Yeah, why not? Everybody else does it. Come on.
Yeah. Well, here, let me go on Twitter and just start typing out some stuff.
Let's do it.
Or X or whatever we're calling it. All I know is the more you get, the greater chance he has of his career being over and it taking longer for him to be, coming back because, it's going to – the medical community is not going to let him come back, even if he's not showing any symptoms from – his most recent concussion. That's just how they're going to handle it. They're going to be much more cautious with each one. And I think based on how last year's couple of concussions looked, it was scary in one instance for people, but beyond that, the league's always overly concerned with its image, whether people want to believe that or not. And that was an instance where they've always been concerned about head injuries. They've always been concerned about CTE. And they needed to be overly cautious with how things were handled with Tua. So, and the reason why this came up in our conversation before the show is Terron Armstead is a great player. If he's not there, you're going to have less of a player, obviously, protecting for Tua. And if there's a question mark you have about the Dolphins, I think what most would say the offensive line, at least offensively, is probably one of the question marks. And because of that, can they protect Tua and can he stay healthy? Like if your biggest question is Tua's health, it's directly correlated to the offensive line and how they play. And if you don't have your best players out there, it's going to be you're going to have a hard time protecting them. So my thought was just, well, what happens if he does get banged up? If he does get another concussion, is he out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I mean, who knows depending on the symptoms and depending on the severity of it. But because of the history of concussions, there's a good chance he's going to miss more time than he did in the past. And based on the conversation last year where some people were talking about how they didn't even know if he should come back and ever play again.
Yeah.
Literally, people were talking about like how Tua should retire. And I'm sure there's going to be people that bring that stance back up again. I mean, they're not going to listen to Tua. They're just going to give their opinion. But like all that stuff is potentially out there. Should it happen again this season?
Yeah, I feel like they're in a can't-win spot, and I feel like – because it wouldn't it be possible, let's say he suffers a concussion, and he's able to be cleared, if he were anybody else, he's able to be cleared within the week leading up to the next game. I still think they wouldn't play him. I feel like just the optics, all of that surrounding it, it feels like they're kind of in this no man's land where you just gotta. It's almost like you're at 2 strikes and you're desperately hoping you don't get a third because it's over. And I don't. The likelihood he's gonna play the rest of his career and never suffer a minor concussion, like never get dinged ever again. Playing in the NFL, I feel like he's not that he's been set up to fail, but I feel like the expectations for why he would get clearance and be allowed to play have been skewed, and I don't know that it's necessarily fair to Tua or to the Dolphins, if that makes any sense. I feel like they're in a really, really tough spot with where this whole thing was headed, and I think last year and the way it played out on national TV, and we've made the point earlier in the offseason, Man, Kenny Pickett suffered 2 concussions too. Like, that didn't get a fraction of the coverage that Tua got.
Because you know how it is. It didn't look the way that Tua's did.
Yeah, and it wasn't on Amazon Prime with Al Michaels complaining about the matchups. That's the truth. I mean, one of those was on Amazon Prime, and he's like, his hands are locked up. Like, Kenny Pickett was buried in a bunch of other games, but he still suffered 2 concussions. Never gets talked about like Tua does.
No, it's a great point. And I'm not sure what Al Michaels.
I don't know.
Outside of it being in prime time.
Sorry, Al.
It's streaming, but
sorry about that.
Look,
Al.
he should be more excited about this year's schedule. It's a great Thursday night schedule.
He definitely.
We assume so.
Yeah.
I mean, it should go down. You know, the game should conclude with a nice finish like the steak he has at halftime.
That is true.
That is the craziest thing, if it's true, that I've ever heard about in broadcasting.
That's all he eats.
Because you have such a short amount of time for an NFL halftime. I mean, I've told you the story when I was calling a Bengals game. It was Bengals-Bears in Cincinnati. And I had stepped out of the booth, was running to the bathroom. There's like a line. And I happened to like run into a lot of people that I knew. And so I'm talking to different people. And next thing I know, I'm being yelled at. They're like, we're on air. Like, we came back that fast. Like, we didn't even have time to do like a hit coming out from like our break. We just kind of got back right into it and for kickoff. And I'm like running back, throwing my headset on, and like the ball's being kicked. I'm like, holy cow. So it's like to think that you could sit down and cut up a steak. I just and actually enjoy it and like not have to wolf it down. It's crazy to me.
I like, when does it get prepared? Are they working on it at halftime? Is it?
Well, if you're in Cincinnati, you get Jeff Ruby's. You get Jeff Ruby to bring you a nice steak. That's what. I mean, you've got to have at that point. You're calling someone within the broadcast crew. There's usually what's called a runner, and the runner's going to go out, which is going to be tough to do. They're going to have to go out, go to Jeff Ruby's, go get that finely prepared steak, and they're going to have to, run back through security, up the elevator, take it in through like the metal detectors and all that, and then finally, bring it to you. But I'm trying to picture like a small table with a white tablecloth.
Yep.
And like a big steak knife. It can't be plastic because it's not going to cut it in time.
And he's got a napkin tucked in his collar, covering his tie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there, and he's got a little glass of Cabernet sitting at the table.
Oh, you think
maybe there's like a little flower arrangement too, just for the decor.
I was going to ask that. So, do you think he goes red wine with the steak at halftime?
For sure, you have to.
Okay, and then
you've got Herb Street, who's just out there grinding, like getting the stats from the first half, talking to the producer and the director about what he wants to see in the second half and his thoughts, and he'd probably go to the bathroom quick. He's like throwing down a hot dog. Meanwhile, you've got Al Michaels just sitting there the whole time eating this beautiful steak.
Wouldn't you be concerned with like burping when the second half started? That would be my concern.
Burping or hiccups? Like, what do you mean?
Burping or hiccup? Listen, hiccups apparently is the new trend. That's the new fad.
That can take you out, man.
That can pop up. But would you be? I would be worried about having burps, hiccups. It like that sort of issue trying to talk and call.
You have
a
a mute button. It's so different than what we have now. Like when you rip because you've got gas issues, you hit the mute button.
I mean, I don't think we have to air out everybody's dirty laundry here.
I'm not airing it out, but we all know your dairy habits. When you have a little bit of dairy, all of a sudden you become an absolute bomb waiting to go off.
I'm just.
How the hell do they know that I got gas?
I don't know, but I'm just drinking straight coffee. That's what I do. I go black coffee. That's the way I operate, and I use that to get through the show.
I've been on Celsius lately, dude. This stuff is delicious.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know. Not a sponsor. Not interested.
Okay.
You want to be a part of it.
Maybe we work on that.
Yeah, hopefully.